13 cents, Harriet said, and Manda emptied her little purse onto the table for the loaf. Nothing remained inside. Clay moved his beans and tin cup aside. There's room here. Manda sat only on the far edge of the bench, then asked, "Who makes room for you?" And for once, Clay had no ready answer. The eating house in Cuero was loud with freight men, cattle buyers, chair legs, and the clatter of tin against crockery. Late sun came through the front windows and caught the dust in the air. Manda Wright kept both hands on the loaf she had just bought. Her shawl was worn thin at one shoulder. The finger ends of her gloves had been mended more than once. Clay knew what to do with a need that had a price on it. The question was different. "I do fine," he said. Manda looked at him for another second, as if that was not much of an answer. Then she broke off a piece of bread. One loaded ranch wagon had already gone west. Clay's second would leave at daylight. He had a good herd, 6 steady men, and credit in Cuero. People usually wanted something when they sat near him. Manda had spent everything she had and asked what anybody gave him. He gestured toward his bowl. "I've got enough beans. If you want a plate?" "No, thank you." "All right." He let the answer stand. A moment later, he reached for his cup and caught his elbow against the oil lantern. The brass base tipped. Manda's hand shot out and steadied it before hot oil could slosh over the table. Clay caught the lantern from the other side. For half a breath, they were both holding it. "That would have improved the meal," he said. Manda's mouth moved not quite a smile. "I doubt Harriet charges extra for lamp oil." Harriet Douglas, who had heard enough from behind the counter, pointed a dishcloth at them. "I charge extra for setting my tables on fire." Clay set the lantern down carefully. The tightness around Manda's face eased by the smallest amount. That was enough. He did not try for another joke. Harriet came around the counter. "I'm sorry about Mrs. Miller, Manda. She couldn't hold the kitchen place a week. Hired a girl from Yorktown 3 days ago." Manda lowered her bread. "I understand. You shouldn't have had to come all this way to find out. She wrote before I left Victoria. The letter crossed me somewhere." Harriet glanced at Clay. "Mr. Langston, your second wagon still goes out at daylight." "It does." Manda turned toward him. She looked at his face, not at the money belt under his coat or the good leather of his boots. "Where does it go?" "Langston's. 18 miles, give or take the bends in the road." "Your ranch?" "My outfit." Clay set his cup down. "There's a house. Rosella Reed runs it. She keeps a small guest room when she hasn't got kin in it." He watched Manda listen to the conditions before the comfort. "I don't have the price of a room here tonight," she said, "and not enough to go back to Victoria. The wagon leaves from the livery after daylight. If you want the ride, there's a place on it. If you want the room, Mrs. Reed says, who sleeps under that roof. Though you own it. I pay for it." Clay glanced toward the door. "If I start assigning beds, Rosella will likely put me out with the dishwater." This time, Manda did smile faint and unwilling, as if the expression had escaped her. Clay liked the sight more than he had any business liking it. "I'll give you my answer in the morning," she said. "That's soon enough." She tore another piece from the loaf. Clay turned back to his beans and made himself eat them instead of watching whether she did the same. Her question stayed with him. At daylight the next morning, Clay found Manda beside the livery yard while his driver backed the second wagon under the shed roof. The November air had a bite that would be gone by noon. Clay checked the breast collar on the near horse, then walked the team once around the yard to see that neither animal favored a foot. Manda waited until he was finished. "I would like the ride, Mr. Langston." Clay nodded. "And I'd like to ask Mrs. Reed for 2 nights in the guest room. But I need a place on your next wagon, back to Cuero, whether you need kitchen help or not. You'll have one. When does it run? 5 days from now, unless weather or cattle change it. And if Mrs. Reed has paid work later, those 2 nights aren't taken from the wage. Clay looked at her. The bread was wrapped in cloth under one arm. She had said every part plainly, with no apology for needing the ride, and no attempt to make herself smaller while asking for it. They aren't, he said. Harriet came hurrying across the street with an envelope in her hand. Manda, this came in late yesterday, forwarded from Victoria. Manda stopped with one boot on the wagon step. The writing stopped her. Clay saw it in the way her fingers went still. She broke the seal herself. He turned away and tightened a strap that did not need tightening. When he looked back, a folded banknote showed for an instant against the paper, before Manda tucked both into her pocket. Harriet's face had gone watchful. Manda climbed onto the wagon bench. I'm ready. Clay could have asked. He did not. The road west took 5 hours. Clay rode ahead where the track narrowed, and they stopped once to water the team. At the creek, Manda waited until he said the bank was firm before stepping down. When Slick Clay caught her boot, she accepted his hand for one step and released it. She did not pretend to know his road or horses, and Clay respected that. He wondered about the letter, then disliked himself for wondering. By afternoon, Langston's came into view. Corrals, barn, bunkhouse, working pens, sheds, and a weathered main house. Nothing was grand. Everything had been built to stand. Rosella Reed came onto the porch before the wagon stopped. She was 51, widowed 12 years, and the only person on the place who could look at Clay's boots on her clean floor and make him turn around without speaking. Clay tipped his hat. Mrs. Reed, Miss Wright needs a room for 2 nights if you have it. Rosella looked at Manda, then at the small cloth bag in her hand. I have it. She'll want the return wagon in 5 days. That wagon belongs to you, Mr. Langston. I assume you know where it goes. Clay heard Manda make a small sound that might have been a breath hiding a laugh. Yes, ma'am. Rosella held the door open. Come inside, Miss Wright. Manda went with her. Clay stayed on the porch until Rosella had given her the guest room key and closed the hall door behind them. Then a hand from the yard called, Mr. Langston. The man had a flower question. Within 10 minutes, Clay had crossed the yard twice for decisions that, if he was being fair, other people could have made. He had always called that keeping hold of his business. That afternoon, Rosella caught him near the pantry door. She is asleep, Rosella said. Do not knock. I came for the coffee count. I know what we have. Clay opened his mouth, closed it, and went back to the cattle. Manda did not appear at supper. Later, Rosella returned from the hall with an empty bowl. Clay was glad she had eaten, and more glad that nobody had made a ceremony of it. The next morning, he was at the remuda before sunrise, changing a horse assignment and sending riders toward the cattle that would ship later in the week. When he crossed toward the house, Manda was sitting on the back porch with a cup Rosella had given her. She looked better, not transformed. Her face was still tired, and the worn shawl was still worn. But she sat upright instead of folding around herself. Clay started toward the pantry. Rosella came out carrying a bucket. You need something, she asked him. Salt meat count. I have it. Flour. I have that too. Clay saw Manda lower her cup. Her gaze followed him, then Rosella, then the pantry door. He had the strange feeling of being observed in his natural habitat and found inefficient. South Riders need a hot meal, he said. Rosella set the bucket down. Mr. Langston, if you want to cook it, I'll hand you the apron. Clay rubbed the back of his neck. Manda looked into her cup. He could see the smile this time. Fine, he said. You have it. Rosella picked up the bucket again. Manda rose at once and reached for it. Rosella moved it out of reach. No. I can carry water. I expect you can. Then. You're a guest today? Manda's hand remained in the air for a second before she let it fall. Clay knew that movement. He had spent his first years on the place working for every meal before he ate it. Even after he could afford hired men sitting while other people worked, had made his skin itch. Mrs. Reed is right, he said. The room and meals were offered. You don't have to earn them today. Manda looked at him. Nothing at all. Resting seems to be taking all your strength. Rosella's eyes cut toward him. Clay added quickly, That wasn't meant badly. I know, Manda said. She sat down again. That cost her more than the bucket would have. Clay could see it in the way she folded her hands around the cup. He went back to the yard. Twice that day, he started toward the house with a question. Twice he stopped himself and let Rosella answer her own work. Near dusk, he came in from the barn and found Manda on the back steps. She had washed the dust from her face. Her hair was pinned more neatly, though several dark strands had worked loose near her temple. A folded piece of cloth rested in her lap where she had been mending one glove. Clay would have walked past if she had only looked up. Instead, she said, I was going to sit a while. He stopped. You could if you wanted. For the first time since he had met her, she was asking nothing about food wages, rooms, horses, or roads. Clay took off his hat. All right. He sat on the far end of the step. There was room between them for another person, which seemed sensible, and somehow made him more aware of her. For a while, they said nothing. A horse shook its head near the corrals and set a bit of chain ringing. Clay was good at silence when there was work on either side of it. This silence had no work in it. He turned his hat once in his hands. Manda said, Do you always inspect the pantry twice before noon? Clay looked at her. Rosella told me you came back a third time and changed your mind. Rosella talks too much. She said you would say that. He huffed a laugh. Then the quiet came back easier than before. When I first came out here, Clay said, there wasn't a pantry to inspect. 2 mares, a borrowed wagon, more dirt than sense. Manda waited. I slept under the wagon bed for 6 months. When it rained, I told myself the boards leaked less than a roof I couldn't afford. You stayed. I had nowhere better to be. That's not the same as wanting to stay. The words landed softly. Clay looked toward the barn. No, he said. It isn't. He did not tell her that after the ranch had become profitable, he had kept living as if every roof beam might disappear if he stopped holding it up. He did not have the words for that, and he did not need to manufacture them because a woman he barely knew had asked him to sit. Manda folded the glove in her lap. It's a good roof now, she said. Clay looked at her and found that he wanted the evening to last longer. That want had nothing to do with whether she could work, whether Rosella needed help, or whether the ranch would benefit from another pair of hands. It made him cautious. Rosella lit the lamp inside the kitchen. Clay stood. Cold's coming on. Manda nodded. He put his hat back on. Mr. Langston? Yes. Tomorrow, when my guest days are done, I'd like to speak to you and Mrs. Reed about paid work. Clay almost said he had already been thinking the same thing. He stopped himself. After breakfast, he said. The next morning, Manda sat across from Clay and Rosella at the long kitchen table. She did not ask Clay if he could find something for her to do. She asked Rosella, Do you need another paid hand? Rosella considered her. I need another person when the rider's hours change. I don't need somebody underfoot. I've worked 4 years in eating house and boarding kitchens. I can bake, keep stores, and time meals when men come in by watches instead of all together. Rosella nodded once. That part I could use. Manda turned to Clay. If I'm hired, who tells me when the men eat? Depends on the cattle. Who tells me what leaves the food room? Rosella. Rosella raised an eyebrow. Clay corrected himself. Rosella should. Manda said, yesterday I saw you leave the pens twice to answer questions about flour and salt meat. Clay leaned back. I built this place by knowing what left every shelf and what came back. I believe you. But if you hire my hands and keep every small decision, you haven't hired me for the work I know. Rosella looked down at her coffee, which was how Clay knew she was listening very closely. Manda went on, still playing. Mrs. Reed runs the house. I can keep the food room count under her and set meal times around the rider watches you give us. If the cattle change, you tell us that. If the beans change, you let us tell you. Clay should have been irritated. Instead, he saw yesterday from her side a ranch owner writing in from the pens because somebody wanted to know whether to open another flour sack. It was not the picture he preferred. Manda touched the pocket where the Victoria letter lay. There is another matter, she said. The letter Harriet gave me was from Silas. He keeps a dry goods store in Victoria. He has asked me twice before to marry him. Clay's stomach tightened before his face did. Manda watched him long enough to know he had heard her. He is not a cruel man, she said. He keeps a good house. He pays what he owes. If I went back, I doubt I would ever be hungry. That made the offer heavier, not lighter. But he writes that a wife of his has no business taking wages in another person's kitchen. He says he would provide what I needed. Manda looked down at her hands, then back at Clay. That means if I wanted thread, I'd ask him. If I wanted to send Harriet $1, I'd ask him. If I wanted work outside his house, I'd be asking for that too. He means it kindly. I know he does. I still don't want that life. Clay's first thought was sharp and useless. Then Silas wants the wrong woman. He kept it to himself. Harriet also believes she can give me a kitchen place in Cuero when her girl leaves next week, Manda said. If I work here, I still want the wagon on the day you promised. I want to see that place before I decide where I stay. The ranch could pay her. Clay could give her a better room than anything Harriet was likely to find. He could make the entire problem disappear with money. That was exactly why he did not say any of it. 1 week's trial, he said. He named a fair wage. You work under Mrs. Reed in the house. You keep the store count and meal times. Thursday's wagon's yours, whether you stay here, take Harriet's place, or go back to Victoria. Manda nodded. Agreed. Rosella took a sip of coffee. Then perhaps both of you will stop negotiating in my kitchen and let me serve breakfast. Clay almost smiled. The trial began quietly. Manda counted stores, wrote a short town list, and asked which riders would be near enough for noon food. When she said a supper time, Clay began, "We usually—" Rosella looked at him. "Never mind," he said. That afternoon, a rider came in from Cuero with dust to his hatband and a folded message inside his coat. The buyer wired town, the man told Clay. Cars can take your cattle a day early. He wants them ready. The wire had reached Cuero, not the ranch. The rider had lost several hours bringing it out, which meant Clay had less time than he liked. His mind went to work at once, riders, horses, and extra wagon coffee before dawn. Clay crossed the yard fast and entered the kitchen with orders already formed. Rosella, we'll need coffee and beans by 3. Manda, make me a list of whatever flour's short. I'll pull 2 men from the south fence and send the light wagon. Mr. Langston, he kept going. Before dark, if they can make the first creek, Clay. It was the first time Manda had used his given name. He stopped. She stood beside the food room door. Rosella was behind her with both hands in a bowl of dough. Manda said, "How many men do you need with the cattle?" "All 6, if I can keep them." "Then why are you sending 2 of them for flour?" "Because we're moving the loading ahead. We have flour through Friday." Clay looked at the shelves beyond her shoulder. Manda held out her hand. "What?" "The key." Clay stared at her palm. "If I keep the food room and set the meals, give me the key until the cattle are loaded. Tell me when the men can leave the herd. I will tell you when they eat. If the cattle change, you come in. If they don't, leave the kitchen to us." Rosella did not rescue either of them from the silence. Clay felt every old instinct line up against the request. The herd was his, and if the men went hungry, the fault would land under his name. Manda did not lower her hand. He had asked her to take a wage for work she knew. Now the work had become inconvenient enough to prove whether he meant it. Clay reached into his coat and took out the heavy iron key. He set it in Manda's palm. "Till the cars are loaded, the meals are yours." Manda closed her fingers around it. "Good." Clay turned to Rosella. "You need anything from me?" "No." He almost asked if she was certain. Rosella's expression answered before he could. Clay went back to the cattle. An hour later, when the rider prepared to return to Cuero, Clay saw Manda cross the yard with a sealed envelope. She handed it up to him, along with the folded banknote. Clay recognized the paper from the livery yard. He did not ask what she had written. The rider tucked both inside his coat. Manda watched him go, then turned back toward the kitchen. Clay stood beside his roan with one hand on the saddle horn. He could guess. Guessing was not knowing, and the difference mattered. He mounted and rode out. The next 36 hours were hard work, not a crisis. Cattle pressed gates and tested tired men. At 10 that morning, Clay expected the meal bell. It did not ring. One of the riders caught him looking toward the house. "You waiting on something?" "No." 10 minutes later, Clay checked his watch and nearly laughed at himself. He had given Manda the key and the meal times, then tried to manage both from a cattle pen. He put the watch away. A little later, the bell sounded. 3 men went in while 3 stayed with the herd. Then they traded places. No rider went to town for flour. Nobody came looking for Clay to decide how much coffee should be ground. He had expected letting go of a piece of the ranch to feel like losing ground. Instead, for once, the work held without his hands on every part of it. That evening, Manda came out to the yard with a wrapped bundle for the riders who would start before sunrise. "Rosella says these are yours," she told Clay. He took the bundle. "You're not going to tell me what's in it?" "Food." "I had gathered that." "Then we're both doing well." She turned back toward the house before the exchange could become a performance. Clay looked at the bundle and smiled despite himself. The next morning, the bell rang later than Clay would have chosen. He stayed with the herd. By noon, the cattle were on the road to Cuero. Clay slept a few hours in town, saw them into the cars after daylight, and rode back the next afternoon, rather than force his horse 18 miles at night. He reached the ranch near supper. His first thought was for the remuda. His second was that he wanted to see Manda. That irritated him only because it was true. He washed at the basin by the back door and entered the dining room early. The meal bell sat silent near Manda's hand. Clay stopped at the threshold. Manda looked up. Rosella passed behind her carrying plates. She gave Clay one raised eyebrow. He knew what it meant. Clay took off his hat and waited. Manda glanced at the clock shelf, then back at him. 5 minutes. All right. He stood there. Rosella's mouth twitched. Not one word, Clay told her. I said nothing. You were about to. I have work. Manda turned away to hide a smile. Clay found he did not mind being the joke, when the joke was this small and the food still came on time. After supper, he found Manda on the porch untying her apron. The kitchen door stood open behind her. Rosella was within hearing. The night was cold enough that Clay could see the edge of his breath. "I'm going to look at the remuda," he said. Manda folded the apron over her arm. "Not for work," Clay added. "I thought you might like the walk." She studied him for a moment. "I would." They crossed the yard together. The horses were quiet in the dark. One mare came to the fence and blew softly at Clay's sleeve. He rubbed her forehead, then let his hand fall. Manda leaned on the top rail. "You stayed with the cattle," she said. "I said I would." "You checked your watch." Clay looked at her. She turned her face toward him, innocent. "Who told you?" "No one." "Rosella?" "No." "The riders?" "One of them noticed." Clay sighed. Manda's smile came slowly. It was warmer than the first one in Harriet's eating house. "I checked it once," he said, 3 times. "That's slander. Then you should choose hands who can't count." He laughed low enough not to carry across the yard. After that, they stood without talking. Clay had spent years building a life in which every hour had a use. It was strange to spend 10 minutes beside a fence for no reason, except that Manda had said yes to the walk. Stranger still, it did not feel wasted. Thursday's wagon remained in his mind. He wanted to ask whether she still meant to go. He did not. If she stayed only because he made leaving awkward, he would never trust the answer. 2 mornings later, the second wagon stood ready for Cuero before sunrise. Manda came from the house with her small cloth bag. Clay had arranged nothing special. The same driver was going. The same team would make the same water stop. Harriet knew Manda was coming because a note had gone in with supplies the day before. Clay checked the harness until there was nothing left to check. Manda stopped beside him. "I'll stay one night," she said. "Harriet found a women's room near her place." Clay nodded. "The wagon comes back tomorrow after dinner, if the road stays dry." "I know." He wanted to say the kitchen job could be made permanent now. He wanted to say the ranch could pay more. He wanted to say he had looked toward the porch twice yesterday, for no reason except that he expected to find her there. Instead, he said, "The driver knows to wait if Harriet keeps you late." "Thank you." Manda climbed onto the wagon. She looked at him once before the team moved. Then she went. Clay spent that day exactly where he was supposed to be. He checked the remuda, met 2 riders at the south pasture, examined a sore hoof, and went over winter feed with the man who handled the barn. He did not send a rider to Cuero. He did not invent an errand. Near noon, he came to the kitchen door with Manda's name already forming in his mouth. Rosella stood alone at the work table rolling dough. Clay stopped so abruptly that she looked up. "What is it?" He had no answer ready. No flower question. No cattle time that had not already been given. No reason to be standing there. "Nothing," he said. Rosella watched him for a second, then went back to the dough. Clay turned away. At supper, he sat in his usual chair. Twice he looked toward the back doorway before remembering Manda would not come through it. Rosella served beans. The men ate. The meal ran on time. Nothing was wrong. That was the trouble. Afterward, Clay passed the guest room door. It was shut and dark. He kept walking to the porch. The step where Manda had once asked him to sit was empty. He sat there anyway. From the kitchen came the ordinary sounds of Rosella, putting away plates. The ranch was working. Tomorrow's horses were assigned. The pantry would be counted. The cattle were loaded and gone. Manda was not needed for any of it that night. Clay rubbed a thumb across a split in the leather of his glove and stared into the dark yard. If she stayed in Cuero, he could hire another cook before the next wagon run. He could raise the wage, improve the guest room buy, better flour order, a new stove. He knew how to solve every part of the problem that could be bought. None of those things would make Manda climb to the wagon home. He went inside before the cold settled through his coat. The next day moved no faster. By mid-afternoon, Clay was near the barn when a line of dust showed pale beyond the west gate. The supply wagon. He stood still. At that distance, he could make out only the team, the driver, and the high square of the wagon box. The near horse lifted its head and blocked the bench. For several long seconds, Clay could not tell whether anyone sat beside the driver. He could have walked to the gate. He did not. If the bench was empty, there was nothing he could do at the gate that he could not do here. The wagon came closer. A figure shifted beside the driver, but a bonnet brim and the driver's shoulder hid the face. Clay's hand closed around the barn door latch. He thought of wages, rooms, warm meals, the kind of things he had always known how to offer. If Manda had chosen Cuero, those things would not be reasons to call her back. They would only be things he owned. The team passed the inner fence. Then Manda leaned forward as the wagon turned. Clay saw her face. His grip loosened. She had come back. He let out one quiet breath and stepped away from the barn door before anybody could notice how hard he had been holding it. The wagon stopped in the yard. Manda climbed down with her own bag in hand. She did not wait for Clay to carry it. She thanked the driver, adjusted the strap against her palm, and walked toward the house. Clay followed at a distance that was almost respectable. Rosella opened the kitchen door, took one look at them, and said, "I have biscuits to see to." She went into the pantry and shut the door most of the way. Manda set her bag on the floor. "I saw Harriet." Clay took off his hat. "The kitchen place is there," Manda said. "Fair wage. The room is small, but it is mine if I take it. I can pay for it." Clay's jaw tightened before he could stop it. Manda noticed. "Harriet also had word that my letter was put on the Victoria mail. Silas's money went back with it." Clay said nothing. Manda rested one hand on the handle of her bag. "He would have kept me warm," she said. "He would have kept food in the house. I don't think he meant to be unkind. But I would have had to ask for every dollar I did not earn, and I would have had no work he had not approved." She looked toward the pantry door where the iron key hung on its hook. "I don't want to spend my life asking whether I may use my own hands." The words were quiet. They did more to explain the returned banknote than any insult to Silas could have done. "And Cuero?" Clay asked. "I could stay there. Harriet would take me." That answer struck with its own clean force. Manda looked back at him. "I came here because I like the work. Mrs. Reed treats me fairly. The men have learned not to steal biscuits before the bell." From the pantry, Rosella called, "One man has learned." Manda smiled. Then the smile faded into something steadier. "And I like the life here." Something in Clay's chest pulled tight. "I didn't come back because I had nowhere else to go," she said. "I wanted you to know that." Clay held his hat by the brim. Every easy offer came to him first. More money, a better room, a permanent position, a promise that she would never have to worry again. All of those things belonged to the rancher. None of them said what the man wanted. "I can hire a cook, Manda." She waited. "I can't hire you to stay." He had made offers across cattle pens, bank counters, livery yards, and merchants' desks. None had made his mouth this dry. "I'd like to court you," he said, "if you'll have me calling." Manda's fingers tightened once on the bag handle. Then she let go of it. "You may." Clay did not move. "The room and the wages stand as they did before," she added. "They do." And Mrs. Reed still runs the house. She'd inform us if that changed. A small laugh escaped Manda. Clay held out his hand only after her answer was complete. She looked at it, then placed her hand in his. He did not pull her closer. He did not need to. The touch lasted only a moment, but it was the first thing between them that belonged wholly to courtship, and not to hunger travel work or shelter. When Manda withdrew her hand, Clay put his hat back on. Rosella opened the pantry door. "Are you two finished?" "For now," Clay said. "Good. Supper does not court itself." Manda laughed again. Clay went to wash up. 4 weeks changed the ranch in small ways. Manda kept the food room key during working hours and hung it on Rosella's hook when she was done. Clay stopped asking about flour unless she or Rosella brought him the town list. Manda stopped trying to repay every kindness at once. When Rosella ordered her to sleep another hour through a cold, she argued once then went. Courtship fitted around work. Some evenings, Clay asked Manda to walk to the corrals. Other evenings, she was tired and said no, and he left her to rest. Manda kept her own wages and saved enough that leaving remained possible. One cold evening, she told Clay simply, "Not tonight. I'm tired." A month earlier, she would have found a chore to pay for resting. "Tomorrow, then," he said. The following evening, Manda found him at the back pump. "I was going to sit a while," she said. "You could if you wanted." Clay smiled. "All right." They sat until the lamp inside burned low with no business between them. Late November brought a thin norther through the brush country. The day turned sharp. By supper, the riders had eaten early and gone to the bunkhouse. Clay finished at the barn after dark. He was tired in the good way, the kind that came from work completed, instead of work multiplying in his head. When he entered the dining room, Rosella was not there. Lamplight lay warm over the rough boards. The stove had settled to a steady heat. Manda sat at the far side of the table. A fresh loaf of bread rested in a basket near her hand. Clay stopped inside the doorway. For a second he was back in Harriet's eating house, worn shawl 13 cents, beans tin cup, a stranger sitting at the edge of what little space he had opened. Then Manda reached for the basket. She moved it aside. "Sit," she said. "I saved you a place." Clay looked at the cleared space. He had spent years being useful on purpose. Manda had already eaten. The work was done. No rider waited for orders, and no letter needed an answer. She simply wanted him there. Clay pulled out the chair and sat. For once, he did not look toward the pantry, the yard, or the clock shelf. Manda cut a piece from the loaf and set it on his plate. "You don't have to feed me," he said. "I know." The answer struck him harder than it should have. Clay rested his forearms on the table. "I can buy a table and fill it," he said. "I never learned how to sit at one unless somebody needed something from me." Manda looked at him across the lamplight. Then she reached over and rested her hand lightly on his. "Then sit, because I asked you." Clay turned his hand beneath hers, not holding tight, just meeting it. Outside, a horse shifted in the corral. Somewhere beyond the wall, Rosella moved a pan and very deliberately did not come into the room. Clay smiled. He sat because the work was finished, because Manda could leave and had stayed, and because she had asked. For once, Clay sat because someone wanted him there.